The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
The distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel. We remind the court of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters: the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset, senior army officials, and foot soldiers. Genocidal utterances are therefore not out in the fringes. They are embodied in state policy. The intent to destroy is plainly understood by soldiers on the ground. It is also fully understood by some within the Israeli society, with the government facing criticism for allowing in any aid to Gaza on the basis that it is recanting on its promise to starve Palestinians. Any suggestion that Israeli officials did not mean what they said or were not fully understood by soldiers and civilians alike to mean what they said should be rejected by this court. The evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is also overwhelming and incontrovertible.
The evidence is overwhelming and incontrovertible. Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and gender nonconforming individuals to another episode of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Today is Thursday, January 11th, 2024. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's episode is dedicated to the case that has been brought by the nation of South Africa against Israel, the case of genocide, taken to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, Netherlands, as we saw the 17 justices on the case take to the bench and listened to that black South African attorney by the name of Thembeka Ngukaitobi as he testified to the evidence that he has and the South African coalition and delegation, they have outlined before the ICJ some 84 pages of evidence of genocide, not just actions of genocide, but the language and the intent, the rhetoric, even the scriptural references that were used by Benjamin Netanyahu and then repeated by soldiers that alluded to the Old Testament story of Amalek, where every woman, child, man, and animal in this biblical story were killed. This was the sentiment that I had all but forgotten that Benjamin Netanyahu said that. I'm doing today's episode because I think it's important that we understand the actual evidence, the truth. So I want you to hear it for yourself. Listen.
Madam President and distinguished members of the court, it is a privilege to appear before the court on behalf of South Africa. I will address Israel's genocidal intent. At this stage, the court is not required to determine that the only inference to be drawn from the available evidence is genocidal, to order provisional measures, as that is to decide the merits. Rather, the assessment of the existence of an intent to destroy could be made by the court only at the stage of the examination of the merits. That some of the alleged acts may also amount to atrocities other than genocide does not exclude the finding of plausible acts of genocide. Madam President, South Africa is not alone in drawing attention to Israel's genocidal rhetoric against Palestinians in Gaza. 15 United Nations special rapporteurs and 21 members of the United Nations working groups have warned that what is happening in Gaza reflects a genocide in the making and an overt intent to destroy the Palestinian people under occupation. Israel has a genocidal intent against the Palestinians in Gaza. That is evident from the way in which Israel's military attack is being conducted, which has been described by Ms. Hassim SC. It is systematic in its character and form. The mass displacement of the population of Gaza, headed into areas where they continue to be killed, and the deliberate creation of conditions that, quote, lead to a slow death, unquote. There is also the clear pattern of conduct, the targeting of family homes and civilian infrastructure, laying waste to vast areas of Gaza, and the bombing, shelling, and sniping of men, women, and children where they stand, the destruction of the health infrastructure, and lack of access to humanitarian assistance. These two elements alone are capable of evidencing Israel's genocidal intent in relation to the whole or part of the Palestinian population in Gaza.
Now, that's just the beginning of his speech, but I want you to take a minute to pause and reflect on what was just given, in addition to 84 pages of evidence and more evidence that is to come. The wholesale targeting of infrastructure, that is in civilian infrastructure to be sure, that is one of the definitions of genocide. The displacement of large populations of people, another definition of genocide. But when you add on top of it the intentional targeting of civilian homes and the sniping, you heard him correctly, the sniping of civilians where they stand, where they stood. All of these things combine to show a very grim reality of what is happening in Gaza right now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Anyone who is justifying this has lost the plot, or they never had the plot to begin with. Anyone who could look at the images of rows and rows and rows of children laid out, being prepared for burial. You simply cannot look at the indiscriminate bombing, the dropping of 2,000-pound bombs on civilian centers, the targeting of refugee camps, the viciousness and the cruelty of the Benjamin Netanyahu regime has far surpassed any of our expectations. I understood immediately when the narrative of the beheaded babies was spread around. I knew without a doubt that this was going to be a massacre of the innocents that live in Gaza, no longer, because Gaza is no longer habitable. Listen in more.
There is an extraordinary feature in this case that Israel's political leaders, military commanders, and persons holding official positions have systematically and in explicit terms declared their genocidal intent. And these statements are then repeated by soldiers on the ground in Gaza as they engage in the destruction of Palestinians and the physical infrastructure of Gaza. We show this third element next. Israel's special genocidal intent is rooted in the belief that, in fact, the enemy is not just the military wing of Hamas, or indeed Hamas generally, but is embedded in the fabric of Palestinian life in Gaza. On 7 October, in a televised address, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared war on Gaza, and I quote, Israel had started clearing out the communities that have been infiltrated by terrorists. And he warned of an unprecedented price to be paid by the enemy.
That's the framing, right? That has been the framing since day one. They have to root out the terrorists. But when you have targeted the entirety of Gaza, first northern Gaza, and now even the southern portions, the places where The Palestinians were told to go and seek refuge. They bombed a refugee camp with a 2,000-pound bomb. When you connect this with the language and the rhetoric that was given from day one, and then you connect the dots of the atrocities that have been committed since October 7th, there is a clear line from the intention to commit genocide to the 12,000 children who are dead now, the 20,000 plus civilians who have been killed. Benjamin Netanyahu and the far right-wing Likud party of Israel, the hardliners, they fully believed and expected to be able to get away with genocide. Now, unfortunately, we are powerless in stopping the act of genocide that's happening as we speak. But Benjamin Netanyahu and the far right-wing Likud party, they believed that they could get away with it without being held accountable because of the United States cover. I, for one, am grateful that they have found out that the world is actually bigger than the United States. As South African attorney Tembeka Ngcukaitobi continues with his evidence.
There are more than 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. Israel is the occupying power in control of Gaza. It controls entry, exit, and the internal movements of inside Gaza. And Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, exercises overall command over the Israeli Defense Force and, in turn, the Palestinians in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his address to the Israeli forces on 28 October 2023, preparing for the invasion of Gaza, urged the soldiers to remember what Amalek has done to you. This refers to the biblical command by God to Saul for the retaliatory destruction of an entire group of people known as the Amalekites, put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys.
Now he's referring to the passage out of the Old Testament, 1 Samuel 15, verses 1 through 3, where it reads as follows. I want to give you the background of what happened to the Amalekites and why it is so critical for this South African attorney to point out the language that was evoked. And here it is, 1 Samuel 15, verses 1 through 3. Samuel also said unto Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, hearken thou unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. That evocation of Amalek, as it pertains to this Old Testament scripture, has to be the clearest indication of genocidal intentions, with the added bonus of religious justification thereof. Now, I haven't had a chance to do my deconstruction magic on this particular scripture. I've been doing a lot of deconstruction of literature and structures and different things. I can't quite answer the question I want to answer yet about this particular scripture, but what I can tell you is that Benjamin Netanyahu reciting that as justification for their actions, yeah, that's a clear indication of genocidal intentions.
The genocidal invocation to Amalek was anything but idle. It was repeated by Mr. Netanyahu in a letter to the Israeli Armed Forces on 3 November 2023. Madam President, let the Prime Minister's words speak for themselves.
Has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember, and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza.
The Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, has called for the erasure of the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. The Defense Force agrees On 9 October, the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, gave a situation update to the army, where he said that as Israel was imposing a complete siege on Gaza, there would be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything would be closed because Israel is fighting human animals.
We covered that the day he said it. Listen in. I have ordered a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no fuel, no water. Everything closed. We are fighting human animals, and we act accordingly. And so, because they dehumanized the entirety of the Palestinian people in Gaza as being animals, human animals. I don't know if that was supposed to soften the blow, but for sure we can say they carried out that exact mentality.
Speaking to troops on the Gaza border, he instructed them that he has released all the restraints and that Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. We will reach all places. Eliminate everything. Reach all places without any restraints. The theme of destruction of human animals was reiterated by an Israeli army coordinator of government activities in the territories on 9 October 2023, who, in an address to Hamas and the residents of Gaza, stated that Hamas has become ISIS and that the citizens of Gaza are celebrating instead of being horrified. He concluded that human animals are dealt with accordingly. Israel has imposed a total blockade on Gaza. No electricity, no water, just damage. You wanted hell, you will get hell. The language of systematic dehumanization is evident here. Human animals, both Hamas and civilians, are condemned. Within the Israeli cabinet, this is also a widely held view. The Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, Israel Katz, called for the denial of water and fuel, as this is what will happen to a people of children killers and slaughterers. This admits of no ambiguity. It means to create conditions of death of the Palestinian people in Gaza. To die a slow death because of starvation and dehydration, or to die quickly because of a bomb attack or snipers, but to die nevertheless. In fact, Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu said that Israel must find ways for Gazans that are more painful than death. It is no answer to say that neither are in command of the army. They are ministers in the Israeli government. They vote in the Knesset and are in a position to shape state policy.
What he's doing there is outlining the case both against the state of Israel as well as key leaders like the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Energy, all of the individuals he's named, because when it comes to cases of genocide before the Hague, before the ICJ, not only can the nation of Israel be held accountable for what it did to Palestine, but the leaders as individuals can also be held accountable. And so all of the words, I won't dare call them idle words because they made good on these genocidal intentions. They have killed over 12,000 children, right? But every word that came out of their mouths across social media has been recorded and captured. And the case of genocide wasn't made by South Africa. It was just simply revealed before the ICJ by South Africa.
The intent to destroy Gaza has been nurtured at the highest levels of state, as President Isaac Herzog has joined the ranks of those signing bombs destined for Gaza. Having previously noted that the entire population in Gaza is responsible and that this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved is absolutely not true.
Collective punishment.
We will fight until we break their backbone. Later attempts by the president and others to neutralize this speech have not altered the sting of his words, which was to tar all Palestinians as responsible for the actions of Hamas. Nor, as I will show below, has it affected how state policy is understood within government. The Minister of National Security repeated the President's statements that Hamas and civilians are responsible in equal measure. On 10 November 2023, in a televised interview, he stated that when we say that Hamas should be destroyed, it also means those who celebrate, those who support, and those who hand out candy. They are all terrorists, and they should also be destroyed. These are orders to destroy and to maim what cannot be destroyed. These statements are not open to neutral interpretations or after-the-fact rationalizations and reinterpretations by Israel.
This point is critical because one of the master strokes of the powerful, no matter where you find them, and let's be clear, Israel with the backing of the United States is pretty powerful, but he's speaking specifically about the leadership as they are now trying to recant and reinterpret and redefine the meaning of their words. They didn't really mean it like that. They didn't really mean human animals, etc., etc. Not only do they not have the right to reinterpret those words at this point, but the reason they don't have the right to reinterpret those words is because over 20,000 people have been killed, 12,000 of them being children. They made good on every single one of those words.
The statements were made by persons in command of the state. They communicated state policy. It is simple. If the statements were not intended, they would not have been made. The genocidal intent behind these statements is not ambiguous to the Israeli soldiers on the ground. Indeed, it is directing their actions and objectives. On 7 December 2023, Israeli soldiers proved that they understood the Prime Minister's message to remember what the Amalek has done to you as genocidal. They were recorded by journalists dancing and singing. We know our motto, there are no uninvolved, that they obey one commandment, to wipe off the seed of Amalek. The Prime Minister's invocation of Amalek is being used by soldiers to justify the killing of civilians, including children. These are the soldiers repeating the inciting words of their Prime Minister. Israeli soldiers in Gaza were filmed dancing, chanting, and singing in November. May their village burn, may Gaza be erased. There is now a trend among the soldiers to film themselves committing atrocities against civilians in Gaza in a form of snuff video. One recorded himself detonating over 50 houses in Shujaiya. Other soldiers were recorded singing, "We will destroy all of Khan Yunis and this house. We will blow it up for you and for everything you do for us." These are the soldiers putting into effect their command. The commanders of the army are also of the same mind. Israeli army commander Yair Ben David has stated that the army had done in Beit Hanon and did there as Shimon and Levi did in Nablus, and that the entire Gaza should resemble Beit Hanon. Israeli soldier Yeshai Shalev published a video against the backdrop of the ruins of what was the site of Al-Azhar University with the caption, "Once upon a time, there was a university in Gaza, and in practice, a school for murderers and human animals." Soldiers obviously believe that this language and their actions are acceptable because the destruction of Palestinian life in Gaza is articulated state policy.
It is articulated state policy that matriculates and trickles down. from the prime minister down to soldiers who believe it to be so okay that they post it on social media. That's the fascinating thing about this particular year's genocide. It's that we get to see it in real time. And what bothers me about this is that people are looking at the same videos that we see. Video I saw this morning that I don't think I could ever forget of a kid who had to be no more than, 12 years old, picking up body parts of his little sister. A baby. When we see this happening in real time, it also presents the opportunity for the people doing it who think there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. In fact, they feel like it's ordained by God because of the evocation of Amalek. They post videos, and now those videos are being presented to the International Court of Justice.
Senior political and military officials encouraged without censure the 95-year-old Israeli army reservist Ezra Yachin, a veteran of the Deir Yassin massacre against the Palestinians in 1948, to speak to the soldiers ahead of the ground invasion in Gaza. In his tour, he echoed the same sentiment while being driven around in an officially Israeli army vehicle dressed in Israeli army fatigue. I quote, "Be triumphant and finish them off, and don't leave anyone behind. Erase the memory of them. Erase them, their families, mothers and children. These animals can no longer live. If you have an Arab neighbor, don't wait, go to his home and shoot him. We want to invade, not like before. We want to enter and destroy what's in front of us, and destroy houses, then destroy the one after it. With all of our forces, complete destruction, enter and destroy. As you can see, we will witness things we've never dreamed of. Let them drop bombs on them and erase them."
Let them drop bombs on them and erase them. We'll get back to the literal, actual dropping of bombs on Gaza, which has completely flattened it. They went as far as over the Christmas holidays to erase Palestine from the history books because the narrative of Israel bombing Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christ, on Christmas Day, which is currently in the Palestinian territories, which was a part of a region called Palestine, interchangeably with Judea, as noted by Josephus Flavius, the Jewish historian who was a contemporary of Jesus Christ, as well as the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote in 450 BCE and named it, or called it rather, Palestine. They had to erase that. And so over the Christmas holidays, we saw the narrative go from what most people who paid attention to history knew was a region that was traditionally called Palestine, interchangeably with other names like Judea, yes. But they had to erase it and say, no, it was never called Palestine until a few years after Jesus was executed, crucified. See, this erasure thing is really kind of the point you have to understand about genocide.
As recently as 7 January 2024, a video of a soldier was posted online where he boasts that the army had destroyed the entire village of Hibat Azar. For 2 weeks, he said, they had worked hard to bomb the village and executed their mandate. Any suggestion that senior politicians did not mean what they said, much less that the meaning was not understood by soldiers in Gaza, would be without any merit. The scale of destruction in Gaza, the mass targeting of family homes and civilians, the war being a war on children, all make clear that genocidal intent is both understood and is being put into practice. The articulated intent is the destruction of Palestinian life in all its manifestations. The genocidal rhetoric is also commonplace within the Israeli Knesset. Members of the Knesset have repeatedly called for Gaza to be wiped out, flattened, erased, and crushed on all its inhabitants. They have deplored anyone feeling sorry for the uninvolved Gazans, asserting repeatedly that there are no uninvolved, that there are no innocents in Gaza, that the killers of the women and children should not be separated from the citizens of Gaza.
The killers of women and children should not be separated from the citizens of Gaza. Here's the thing about all of this. I absolutely love the fact that social media has exposed the type of rhetoric that is necessary to walk a nation into genocide. See, during the Holocaust, no one was privy to this level of information from every single member of the Nazi Party and every single member of a citizen of Germany who may not have been a part of the Nazi Party, but they supported whatever the case may be. The different layers of power, from Hitler all the way down to the average brown coat. You did not get to hear the words of the Rwandan genocide. Right, what led up to it and what helped sustain it. But we're watching on social media in real time the exact language and wording that is necessary to not only get you into a genocide, but sustain it through its entirety. And guess what? That's exactly the evidence that has been recorded in digital format and is now easily accessible for anyone to see. The only question is will the judges see of these 84 pages of evidence presented by South Africa against the nation of Israel, not against the Jewish people, like so many people are saying today. No, it's not possible for this to be against the Jewish people because there are so many wonderful, amazing brothers and sisters of Jewish origin and descent and faith who are absolutely against what is happening in Gaza. So no, this is not a lawsuit against the Jewish people. If anything, if we were to refine it down to precisely who it is against the administration, the far right-wing administration and military leaders and officers, I'm assuming will get caught up in this as well, of Benjamin Netanyahu, representing the far right wing of Israel, for which many Jewish Israelis right now are calling for Benjamin Netanyahu to resign. So no, this case of genocide is not being brought against Jewish people. It's being brought against the far right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu and the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, because, well, yeah, he is in charge of your nation. And because the United States gave him cover, well, they thought so confidently that they could get away with this. And now not only is Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet and his military officials being held accountable, but the nation of Israel is being held accountable as well. And if you cannot separate the nation of Israel from the Jewish people, well, then you're intentionally obtuse, one, right? You're just a bad faith actor, or you are severely uninformed. Let's get back to the ICJ.
And that the children of Gaza have brought this upon themselves. And that there should be one sentence for everyone there: death. Finally, the lawmakers have called for mercilessly bombing from the air, with some advocating for the use of nuclear doomsday weapons, and a Nakba that will overshadow the Nakba of 48. The Prime Minister's genocidal speech has gained ground among some elements of civil society. A famous singer has repeated Mr. Netanyahu's Amalek reference, stating that Gaza must be wiped out and be destroyed with every Amalek seed. We simply must destroy all of Gaza and exterminate everyone who is there. Another has called to erase Gaza, not leave a single person there. Journalists and commentators have announced that the woman is an enemy, the baby is an enemy, the pregnant woman is an enemy. That it is necessary to turn the strip into a slaughterhouse, to demolish every house our soldiers come across. Exterminate everyone.
Exterminate everyone. And in fact, that is what has been happening. Have you seen the completely flattened regions? Thousands and thousands of acres of flattened regions. Have you seen the bodies?
The intentional failure of the government of Israel to condemn, prevent, and punish such genocidal incitement constitutes in itself a grave violation of the Genocide Convention. We should recall, Madam President, that in Article 1 of the Convention, Israel confirmed that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law, and it undertook to prevent and to punish it as such. This failure to prevent, condemn, and punish such speech by the government has served to normalize genocidal rhetoric and extreme danger for Palestinians within Israeli society. As MK Moshe Sada from the Likud party has said, the government's own attorneys share his views that Palestinians in Gaza must be destroyed. I quote, "You go anywhere and they tell you to destroy them. In the kibbutz, they tell you to destroy them. My friends at the state attorney's office who fought with me on political issues in debate said to me, it is clear that we need to destroy all Gazans. Destroy all Gazans." Israel is aware of its destruction of Palestinian life and infrastructure. Despite this knowledge, it has maintained and indeed intensified its military activity in Gaza. As to full awareness, in the week after 7 October, NGOs and the United Nations warned of an unprecedented humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The UN stated that actors must allow humanitarian teams and goods to immediately and safely reach the hundreds of thousands of people in need. So right from the beginning, Israel knew that it was depriving water, food, electricity, and essentials for survival. It said so. Everything is closed. It has known that it was depriving Palestinians of health care and treatment for injury in the middle of an unprecedented bombardment, of food and water, and of other essentials for survival. This prompted the World Health Organization to say, "We are on our knees asking for sustained, scaled-up, protected humanitarian operations, appealing to all those in a situation to make a decision or influence decision makers to give us the humanitarian space to address this human catastrophe." Despite this knowledge, Israel continues to target infrastructure essential for survival: water and sanitation infrastructure, solar panels, bakeries, mills, crops. It bombs hospitals, decimating the healthcare system. It targets aid workers and the infrastructure of the United Nations. It is because of the policy of Israel that Gaza has become a place of death and despair.
The place of death and despair, the targeting of infrastructure, the targeting of civilians, the targeting of journalists, the indiscriminate bombing, the complete obliteration. There's nothing left, no infrastructure. It is honestly the perfect condition for them to just go through with a bulldozer and clear everything off and build their new settlements. That's how flattened the land is. And when you combine that with the genocidal rhetoric that you cannot deny, and I've lost a couple of friends over this, and that's so be it. But you cannot listen to the words that are still being said and look at the results that are being yielded and not connect the dots of genocide unless you intend on ignoring it for whatever the justification is. The genocidal intentions of Benjamin Netanyahu and the far-right-wing government of Israel have been so loud and so clear that this case was presented today in the International Court of Justice by the nation of South Africa. Salutations to South Africa for taking a stand in a manner that so many of us who wanted to do something simply could not because we didn't have the power.
In conclusion, Madam President, many propagators of grave atrocities have protested that they were misunderstood that they did not mean what they said, and that their own words were taken out of context. What state would admit to a genocidal intent? Yet, the distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel. We remind the court of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters: the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset, senior army officials, and foot soldiers. Genocidal utterances are therefore not out in the fringes. They are embodied in state policy.
That's right.
The intent to destroy is plainly understood by soldiers on the ground. It is also fully understood by some within the Israeli society, with the government facing criticism for allowing in any aid to Gaza on the basis that it is recanting on its promise to starve Palestinians. Any suggestion that Israeli officials did not mean what they said or were not fully understood by soldiers and civilians alike to mean what they said should be rejected by this court. The evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is also overwhelming and incontrovertible.
Overwhelming and incontrovertible. You know, that's the hubris of empire. In this case, it's empire by proxy through the United States of America, which the United States of America should keep their eyes open, because it's a good possibility that they will face a similar case of genocide against the Palestinian people, because it's our bombs that are being dropped on the Palestinian people. It's our weapons. It's our cover. It's our political cover. It's our Secretary of State who has gone over there 4 times since October 7th to show solidarity with what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. It's our President of the United States who showed up in the very first week of this to support and insisted on continuing that support, insisted on spreading the story of the beheaded babies with no evidence. So the United States, if I'm not mistaken, they might have to keep an eye out themselves for a case before the International Court of Justice. At the end of the day, all that matters is that justice is served and that there is a ceasefire and that as many people who can be saved at this point will be saved. And you would think that that should be obvious to decent human beings. I know that when we talk about these political questions and these debates, that when we talk about the conservative side of the equation, we have ample evidence to show their inhumanity towards everyone. But in this case, the amount of conservatives, yes, white evangelicals, yes, Christian nationalists, yeah, but good old Democrats, good old liberals, the amount of them who are supporting this and refuse to even see the genocide, well, again, America, keep your eyes open, because there's a good possibility that you too, what I'm saying you, we, us, because my taxpayer dollars are going over there as well, that we would be held accountable for this genocide. I'll see you again next time, folks. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.